John Miller wiped sweat from his forehead as he made his way through the thick undergrowth. The Amazon basin in June was always hot, but today felt even worse than usual. The air hung heavy with moisture, making each breath feel like drinking warm soup. John had been a wildlife biologist for 15 years, but the rainforest still found ways to challenge him. "Hey John, you might want to see this," called Susan Wright through the radio. Susan was stationed at the observation tower, half a mile north of John's position. "What is it, another jaguar?" John asked, hoping they might get lucky with their current tracking project. "No," Susan replied, her voice strangely tight. I think it's a spacecraft." John stopped walking. He must have misheard. "A what?" "Spacecraft. As in, not from Earth. It just came down about 3 miles west of us. I'm looking at it through the high-powered scope right now." John stood frozen for several seconds, then broke into a run toward the research station. If this was some kind of joke, Susan had picked a strange time for it. But Susan wasn't the joking type, especially during field research. 20 minutes later, John stood with 5 other researchers on the observation platform, taking turns looking through the scope. There was no mistaking it. A pearly white oval, structure about the size of a small bus, now sat half-submerged in the swampy area near the western river bend. Strange lights pulsed along its surface. "We need to call this in," said Maria Garcia, the station director. "To who exactly?" asked Ben Harris, the team's botanist. "The Brazilian government? The UN? NASA?" "All of them," Maria replied, already, pulling out the satellite phone. "But it might take days for anyone official to get here." John looked through the scope again. "There's movement. I think something's coming out." The group fell silent as they watched a hatch open on the top of the craft. 3 figures emerged. Even from this distance, it was clear they weren't human. They moved with an odd, jerky grace, and even through the heat haze, John could make out multiple limbs. They looked like... Ben started. "Like insects," John finished. "Really big insects." The creatures appeared to be surveying their surroundings. One pointed toward the river, another toward the dense forest. The third seemed to be consulting some kind of device. "They're stuck," Susan said suddenly. "Look at how their ship is sinking, into the swamp. They probably thought it was solid ground from above." John made a decision. "I'm going to make contact." Maria grabbed his arm. "Are you crazy? We have no idea who or what they are." "They're visitors who made a bad landing choice," John replied. "And they're in the middle of one of the most dangerous ecosystems on Earth without knowing it. If they wander into anaconda territory or disturb a caiman nest, things could go badly very quickly." In the end, John didn't go alone. Susan, Ben, and Rick Powell, their security specialist, went with him. They took the electric boat, approaching slowly with a white cloth tied to the bow, a universal symbol of peace, they hoped. The aliens noticed them when they were about 50 yards away. All 3 turned toward the boat, their movements becoming more agitated. John could now see they indeed resembled giant praying mantises, standing about 5 feet tall with 4 arms and 2 legs. Their exoskeletons shimmered with an iridescent green and blue. "Slow and steady," Rick advised from the back of the boat. "No sudden movements." When they were 20 yards away, one of the aliens raised what appeared to be a small box. A moment later, a voice emerged from it, speaking in stilted English. "Greetings. We are peaceful explorers from Keldar. Our landing was unplanned. Do you represent Earth Authority?" John glanced at his companions in shock before responding. "We are scientists from an Earth research station nearby. We don't represent any government, but we can help you if needed." The aliens conferred among themselves, making rapid clicking sounds. Then the one with the translation device spoke again. "Help would be appreciated. Our vessel has encountered difficulty with this terrain." As they got closer, John noticed how the aliens' compound eyes reflected the sunlight. Their movements were precise and calculated. They didn't appear threatening, just cautious. The humans introduced themselves, and the aliens did the same, though their names were unpronounceable clicks and chirps. The lead alien, who identified as something that sounded like Sithtal, explained they were part of a larger exploration fleet that had been observing Earth from orbit. This small craft was sent to collect biological samples, Sithtal explained through the device. We did not intend direct contact yet, but our sensors misidentified this wet area as solid landing ground. It's a swamp, John explained. Very common in this region. The ground looks solid, but it's mostly water and loose vegetation. The aliens followed the humans back to the research station, moving with surprising speed despite their caution. John noticed how they kept well away from the water's edge, seeming to understand instinctively that unfamiliar environments held unknown dangers. Once at the station, Maria made contact with authorities while the rest of the team showed the aliens around. The Keldari, as they called themselves, were fascinated by Earth's biodiversity. They explained that their homeworld had much less variety of life forms. Your planet has 8.7 million species by your estimates, Shithatal said, reviewing data on a computer screen with surprising ease. Keldar has fewer than 100,000. This is why we sought your world. Such diversity is rare. As evening approached, the researchers set up temporary quarters for their unexpected guests. The aliens didn't need to sleep like humans did, instead entering short periods of stillness they called alignment. During one such break, John and Susan discussed their situation on the station's deck. It's incredible, Susan said, staring up at the stars. First contact, and it happens in the middle of nowhere to a bunch of field researchers. John nodded. What's interesting is how careful they are about the swamp. They keep asking about dangers. The next morning, as John was showing Sithtal and another Keldari named Vrax the research station's collection of preserved specimens, the alien brought up this very topic. Your species displays unusual fear responses to these waterlogged regions, Sithtal observed, compound eyes fixed on John's face. Yet our scans show minimal technological threats. Is this an evolutionary response to historical predation? John exchanged glances with Susan, who had just entered the room. How could they explain the primal fear that still lingered in human DNA? The knowledge that in places where visibility dropped to inches and solid ground became a luxury, humans were no longer the top predators. It's complicated, John began. But yes, it's partly evolutionary. In environments like swamps, humans become vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? Vrax asked, antennae twitching with curiosity. John smiled slightly. Would you like to see? The morning after first contact, the research station was buzzing with activity. News of the alien visitors had reached the outside world, and government officials were scrambling to organize a proper diplomatic team. For now, though, it was just the research team and their 3 extraterrestrial guests. Kathy Jones, the team's anthropologist, had spent all night preparing a cultural exchange briefing. Her usual work focused on local indigenous tribes, but today she would be explaining humanity to beings from another star system. We should start with the basics of human history, she told John as they set up the projector in the main room. They need context for our relationship with different environments. The 3 Keldari sat on specially reinforced chairs, their insect-like bodies perfectly still as they waited. John noticed how they seemed to absorb everything around them, compound eyes constantly moving, antennae twitching at new sounds or smells. Thank you for joining us, Kathy began, standing beside the first slide showing a timeline of human evolution. To understand humans, you need to understand where we came from. For the next hour, Kathy explained how humans had evolved from tree-dwelling primates to savanna hunters to civilization builders. The aliens watched with what seemed like fascination, occasionally asking questions through their translation device. So humans began in trees, moved to open grasslands, and then created artificial environments, Shithatal summarized. Yet you still maintain biological responses to certain natural spaces. Interesting. Yes, Kathy continued. Throughout human history, different environments posed different challenges. Forest provided shelter but limited visibility. Open plains offered good sight lines but little protection. And wetlands. She paused, bringing up images of various swamps and marshes from around the world. Wetlands were always particularly dangerous. Why? Chittered Vrax, the Keldari biologist. Your species has conquered spaceflight, split atoms, and mapped your own genome. Surely such environments pose minimal threat to beings of your technological advancement. The room fell silent for a moment. John could see the aliens truly didn't understand. Their homeworld likely had nothing comparable to Earth's predators. Technology is recent, Susan explained. Our fear responses evolved over millions of years. They don't disappear just because we invented smartphones. Daniel Clark, the team's herpetologist, stepped forward with a knowing smile. Allow me to introduce you to some of our neighbors. Daniel activated the station's holographic display system. It had been installed for 3D modeling of wildlife migrations, but today it would serve a different purpose. The first image that appeared was a caiman, its eyes glowing red in night footage as it lunged from seemingly placid waters toward a capybara at the shoreline. The attack was lightning fast. One moment the water was still, the next the reptile had clamped massive jaws around its prey. Caiman crocodilus, Daniel explained. An ambush predator that can remain nearly invisible in swamp water for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The aliens made a series of clicking sounds that the translation device didn't interpret. John guessed it might be their version of surprise or alarm. Next came footage of poison dart frogs, their brilliant colors warning of the deadly toxins in their skin. Some of these frogs contain enough poison to kill 10 adult humans, Daniel noted, and they're just one of many venomous species in wetland areas. The presentation continued with electric eels that could deliver shocks powerful enough to stun, a horse, parasites that burrowed into skin, and diseases that had killed millions throughout human history. Malaria alone, Kathy added, has killed more humans than all wars combined, and it breeds in swamp water. The Keldari were clearly processing this information, their antennae moving in synchronized patterns that suggested deep thought or communication. But there's one resident of these swamps that represents why humans have good reason to fear these environments even today, Daniel said, pausing for effect. He tapped a command into the system, and the hologram shifted to show underwater footage. At first it seemed like nothing was there, just murky water and tangled roots. Then something moved. Something big. Eunectes murinus, Daniel said softly. The green anaconda. The footage showed the massive snake in hunting mode, its body thicker than a human thigh sliding silently through the water. Its eyes were positioned on top of its head, allowing it to remain almost completely submerged while still watching for prey. The largest snake in the world by weight, Daniel continued. They can grow over 25 feet long and weigh more than 500 pounds. They don't need venom. They hunt by constriction. The hologram changed to show an anaconda wrapping around a wild pig. The snake's powerful muscles tightened with each exhale of the pig's breath, slowly suffocating it. The Keldari physically recoiled. This creature kills by restricting breathing? Zithtal asked, sounding disturbed for the first time since their arrival. Yes, Daniel replied. Then swallows its prey whole. The final footage showed exactly that, an anaconda unhinging its eye, jaw to consume a large animal in one piece. The process was slow, methodical, and utterly alien to anyone who hadn't seen it before. These predators have shaped human evolution and psychology, Kathy explained as the footage ended. Our ancestors learned to fear dark waters not because they were superstitious, but because things like anacondas would eat them if they weren't careful. The room fell silent. The aliens seemed to be processing what they had seen. After a long moment, Vrack spoke. On our world, no animal hunts our species. Has not for many millions of years. We evolved as dominants. You evolved as both predator and prey. John nodded. That's a good way to put it. This explains much about humans, Zithtal said. Your constant vigilance, your adaptive abilities. Your species carries the memory of being hunted. We don't just remember it, Susan added quietly. In many places on Earth, it still happens. Even with all our technology, we're not always at the top of the food chain. Zithtal's compound eyes focused on John. You offered to show us what makes humans vulnerable in swamps. I believe we now understand in theory. But theory is different from reality. What are you suggesting? John asked, though he already suspected the answer. We would like to see these anacondas in their natural habitat, Sithtal said. To truly understand another species, one must observe its greatest challenges. Daniel and John exchanged glances. Taking aliens on a field expedition to observe apex predators would be unprecedented. It was also potentially dangerous. If you're serious, John said slowly, we could arrange a guided observation trip, but there would be strict safety protocols. Of course, Zithtal replied. On our world, we too have scientific observation standards. We would follow your guidance completely. John looked at Maria, who gave a slight nod. All right then, John said. We'll organize an expedition for tomorrow. But tonight, we should explain exactly what we're getting into. As the meeting broke up, John couldn't help but wonder what the aliens would think when they saw an anaconda up close. Would they finally understand why, despite all of humanity's technological achievements, a primal part of the human brain still tensed up around dark, murky water? Tomorrow they would find out. The morning of the expedition arrived with a heavy mist hanging over the Amazon basin. John woke before sunrise, checking his equipment one final time. Today was not just any field study. It would be the first time in human history that extraterrestrial beings would observe Earth's apex predators up close. Everyone ready? John asked as the team gathered on the dock. The expedition group was small by design. John, Daniel, Susan, and 4 of the Keldari scientists. The third alien, Triz, would remain at the research station with Maria and the others. Lisa Brown, a local guide who had worked with the research team for years, would lead the group. No one knew the swamps better than Lisa, who had grown up in a nearby village and had been tracking anacondas since she was a teenager. All set, Lisa confirmed, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat. We'll take the 2 smaller boats. Less noise that way. The Keldari had been fitted with specially designed environmental suits that would protect their exoskeletons from Earth's humid environment, while still allowing them full sensory access. The suits looked like thin, transparent shells that covered their bodies but left their compound eyes and sensory antennae exposed. These suits will keep you comfortable, Susan explained as she helped Vrax adjust the final connections. But they won't protect you from physical harm. That's why you must follow our instructions exactly. We understand, Zithatal replied. On scientific expeditions, the native guide's word is law. This is true across the galaxy. As they boarded the boats, John noticed how carefully the aliens moved. Despite their insect-like appearance, there was something almost graceful about their movements. Each step was precisely calculated, each motion efficient. The small boats glided silently through the waterways as the sun began to rise. Mist, still, clung to the surface of the water, creating an otherworldly scene that seemed fitting for their extraterrestrial guests. Birds called from the trees and occasionally something would splash in the distance. Stay in the center of the boat, Lisa instructed as they navigated deeper into the swamp. And keep your hands inside. There are more than anacondas to worry about here. The aliens obeyed without question, their compound eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. John wondered what the world looked like through those eyes. Did they see the same colors humans did? Could they detect things invisible to human perception? After about 2 hours of slow, careful navigation, Lisa raised her hand for silence. The boats drifted to a stop near a wide section of the river where fallen trees created a natural dam. Sunlight now streamed through the canopy, illuminating patches of the dark water. This is a prime hunting spot, she whispered. Several large specimens have been spotted here in the past month. Everyone fell silent, eyes scanning the murky water and tangled roots along the shoreline. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the boats and distant bird calls. There, Lisa whispered after several minutes, pointing toward what appeared to be a partially submerged log about 15 yards away. The aliens leaned forward, their compound eyes struggling to differentiate the camouflaged predator from its surroundings. I see nothing of significance, Sithtal admitted. Exactly, John replied quietly. That's the first lesson about anacondas. You rarely see them until it's too late. As if responding to its cue, the log moved, revealing itself as a massive green anaconda, easily over 20 feet long. Its scales glistened in the patches of sunlight as it slowly adjusted its position. The Keldari physically recoiled, their bodies tensing in what John recognized as their version of alarm. Their antennae vibrated rapidly, and a soft clicking sound came from their mandibles. It's so... Vrax's translation device struggled to find the right word. Perfect. A perfect predator. Daniel nodded. The result of millions of years of evolution. They can stay submerged for up to 10 minutes. Their eyes and nostrils are positioned on top of their heads so they can remain almost completely underwater while still seeing and breathing. And their coloration makes them nearly invisible in this environment. As they watched, the anaconda began to move more purposefully, sliding through the water with barely a ripple. Something had caught its attention. Look there. Lisa pointed to the opposite bank where a large capybara, a rodent about the size of a small dog, had emerged from the undergrowth to drink. What happened next occurred so quickly that even the humans who knew what to expect were startled. The anaconda surged through the water with astonishing speed, its massive body launching forward. The capybara noticed too late, trying to scramble away but caught in the snake's powerful jaws. In seconds, the anaconda had wrapped its coils around the struggling animal. One of the Keldari made a sound that needed no translation, a gasp of shock. Their bodies were rigid, antennae straight up in alarm. The pressure exerted by those coils, Daniel explained softly, is around 90 pounds per square inch. Each time the prey exhales, the snake tightens its grip. Death comes from suffocation or cardiac arrest as the heart can't beat against the pressure. The group watched in silence as the anaconda's powerful muscles contracted around its prey. Nature was neither kind nor cruel, simply efficient. After several minutes, the capybara's struggles ceased. Will it consume it now? Asked Jithtal, the translation device conveying a tone of both horror and fascination. Not here, Lisa said. It will take the prey somewhere more secure. Swallowing can take hours and leaves the snake vulnerable. As if hearing her, the anaconda began to move toward the bank, dragging its meal with it. The group watched as the massive predator disappeared into the dense undergrowth, leaving barely a trace of its passage. We will move on, Lisa said after a moment. There's a nesting area about half a mile downstream where we might see younger specimens. As they continued their journey, John noticed the aliens had grown quieter, more observant. They were processing what they had witnessed, not just intellectually but emotionally, if such a term could apply to their alien psychology. On our world, Jithtal said after a long silence, we cataloged and controlled all predator species 10,000 years ago. None remain in the wild. All dangerous creatures are preserved only in containment facilities. Why? Susan asked. It seemed logical. Safety. Efficiency. Jithtal's compound eyes turned toward the water. But watching this creature, I understand something new. Your species evolved alongside true predators. You never had the luxury of controlling all threats. No, John agreed. Earth has too many predators, too many dangers for any species to control completely. This explains much about humans, Vrax added. Your constant vigilance, your adaptability, your speed of response to new threats. As their boats rounded a bend in the river, Lisa suddenly signaled for silence again. Ahead, something was moving in the water, something big. Another anaconda? Whispered Susan. Lisa shook her head, a hint of tension in her face. No. Something else. The water rippled as a dark shape moved beneath the surface, heading directly toward their boats. The alien's antennae went rigid with alarm. Everyone stay. Completely still, Lisa said, her voice low and steady. We're about to meet the other reason humans fear swamps. The boats drifted silently as the dark shape moved beneath the water's surface. John felt his heart rate increase, an ancient response programmed into his DNA by countless generations who had faced similar dangers. Beside him, the Keldari aliens had gone completely still, their antennae rigid. Black Cayman, Lisa whispered, her eyes never leaving the water. Nearly 15 feet long by the look of it, as if responding to her words, the massive reptile surfaced about 20 yards away. Its armored back broke the water's surface, followed by its long snout and cold, unblinking eyes. The caiman regarded the boats for a long moment, then slowly submerged again. "The apex predator of the Amazon waterways," Daniel explained quietly as the creature disappeared. "Even anacondas avoid fully grown caimans." The alien's translation device clicked as Zithtal spoke. "Your world hosts multiple competing apex predators in the same habitat? This seems inefficient." "Earth isn't about efficiency," Susan replied. "It's about adaptation and competition. Different predators have different strengths and hunting strategies." The group continued downstream, the encounter with the caiman having added a new layer of tension to the expedition. John noticed how the aliens now watched the water with the same wariness as the humans, a learned behavior after just hours in the swamp. By midday, they reached a wider section of the river where the current slowed and the water became clearer. Lisa guided the boats toward a sandy bank where fallen trees created a natural shelter. "We'll stop here for lunch," she announced. "But stay alert. This is still their territory, not ours." As they carefully stepped onto solid ground, John noticed how the aliens moved differently now, more cautiously, scanning their surroundings, constantly. They were learning. While the humans unpacked their food, the Keldari consumed nutrient solutions through special ports in their environmental suits. They sat in a tight group, their compound eyes constantly moving. "I have a question," Vrack said after a while. "Your species built cities, technology, weapons. Why not simply eliminate these predators as we did on our world?" Paul Martin, the team's evolutionary biologist who had joined them for this part of the expedition, answered, "We could have. In many places, humans did drive apex predators to extinction, but we've learned that's a mistake." "A mistake?" Siethal's antennae twitched in what John had come to recognize as confusion. "Ecosystems are complex," Paul explained. "Remove one species, and the entire system can collapse. Predators control prey populations. Without them, other species overpopulate and destroy vegetation. Without vegetation, erosion increases, rivers change course, weather patterns shift. Your world is interconnected," Vrax observed. "Exactly," Paul nodded. "And humans are part of that interconnection, not separate from it. That's something our species has only recently begun to understand." After lunch, the expedition continued. Lisa guided them toward a narrow channel where the vegetation grew thicker along the banks. Here, the air was heavy with moisture, and strange calls echoed through the trees. "This area is perfect for younger anacondas," Lisa explained. "Plenty of cover, smaller prey, and fewer large predators." They drifted slowly, eyes scanning the tangled roots and low-hanging branches. Suddenly, Susan pointed to a tree branch that extended over the water. "There," she whispered. Coiled around the branch was a younger anaconda, perhaps 10 feet long. Its body was perfectly arranged to drop directly into the water below if prey approached. "Ambush position," Daniel explained to the aliens. "Young anacondas often hunt from above. They can sense body heat through special pits near their mouths." Keldari watched the snake with evident fascination. Its scales glistened in the dappled sunlight, muscles occasionally shifting as it adjusted its position. "How does such a creature fit into your human concept of nature?" Zithtal asked. "Do you fear it? Respect it? Hate it?" John considered the question. "All of those things, I suppose. We fear it because our ancestors had to. We respect it because it's perfectly adapted to its environment. Some might hate it because it represents a threat we can't fully control. But mostly," Susan added, "we recognize it as a piece of a much larger puzzle. Earth's biodiversity is what makes our planet special. Each species, even the dangerous ones, plays a role." As they continued their journey, the day grew hotter. The air became thick with humidity, and even the aliens seemed affected by the heat despite their environmental suits. "We should head back. Soon?" Lisa suggested, checking her watch. It's not good to be in the deep swamp as evening approaches. Why? Asked Vrax. Many predators are more active at dusk, she explained, including anacondas. As they turned the boats around, a sudden, heavy rain began to fall. Within minutes, the gentle shower had become a downpour, reducing visibility to just a few yards. The sound of raindrops hitting the water was deafening. Stay close, Lisa called over the noise. Follow my boat exactly. The return journey became more challenging as the rain continued. The normally clear channels were harder to identify, and the current grew stronger as rainwater fed into the river system. As they navigated a particularly narrow section, John noticed Jithatal staring intently at the shoreline. What is it? He asked. Movement, the alien replied. Large organism. There. One of the Keldari's forearms pointed toward a tangle of roots and vegetation. John squinted through the rain. At first, he saw nothing. Then a pattern emerged, the unmistakable diamond-shaped scales of an anaconda. But this was no ordinary specimen. The snake was enormous, its body thicker than a man's torso. Lisa, John called quietly. 2 o'clock, in the roots. Lisa turned slowly, her experienced eyes quickly finding what John had seen. Her expression grew serious. That's the biggest one I've ever seen, she whispered. Must be over 25 feet. The massive anaconda seemed unbothered by the rain. It moved with deliberate slowness, its huge body sliding between root systems with surprising grace. The group watched in silent awe as the giant predator made its way toward the water. Is it hunting? Susan asked. No, Lisa replied. It's too big to be hungry often. It probably ate a deer or something similar within the last month and won't feed again for weeks. It's just moving to deeper water because of the rain. The anaconda slid into the river, barely creating a ripple despite its enormous size. For a moment, its head was visible above the surface. Ancient eyes that had watched the world through unchanged millennia. Then, it disappeared beneath the dark water. That, Daniel said softly, was a living dinosaur. Snakes like that have existed, almost unchanged, for millions of years. The Keldari remained silent for several minutes as the boats continued their journey back toward the research station. Finally, Jithatal spoke. I understand now, the alien said. Your fear of swamps is not irrational. It is earned knowledge passed through generations. To ignore such instincts would be foolish. Not just fear, John corrected. Respect. That's what humans have had to learn. We respect what the natural world can do, both its beauty and its dangers. As the research station came into view through the rain, Vrax turned to John. Today has changed our understanding of human psychology, the alien said. Your species carries the memory of being prey. It shapes your thinking, your caution, your innovation. You did not evolve in safety as we did. No, John agreed. Humans evolved with predators all around us. It's part of what made us who we are. The boats docked at the station as evening approached. The rain had finally stopped and the swamp behind them had taken on a golden glow in the setting sun. Beautiful and deadly, a perfect summary of Earth itself. 6 months had passed since the Keldari first landed their craft in the Amazon swamp. In that time, Earth had changed forever. The official first contact protocols had been established, diplomatic relations had begun, and cultural exchanges were happening worldwide. The small research station that had once hosted the first alien visitors was now a historic landmark. John Miller found himself in a very different environment as he stepped out of the transport shuttle. The massive Keldari mothership hung in orbit above Earth, visible as a bright star even during daylight hours. John was part of the first human delegation invited to visit the alien fleet. Quite a change from the Amazon, isn't it? Susan asked as they walked through the pristine white corridor. She had been selected to join the delegation as well, along with scientists and diplomats from around the world. Definitely less humid, John replied with a smile. The air aboard the Keldari ship was cool and dry, regulated to perfection. Ambassador Zrelka, a high-ranking Keldari official who had not been part of the original landing party, met them at the end of the corridor. Like all Keldari, Zrelka resembled a giant praying mantis, but with elaborate markings on her exoskeleton that indicated her important status. "Welcome, Earth delegation." Zrelka greeted them through an advanced version of the translation device. "We are honored by your presence." The group was led through a series of chambers, each more impressive than the last. The Keldari technology was unlike anything humans had created, sleek, organic-looking, yet clearly highly advanced. John noticed how the other aliens they passed often stopped to watch the humans with evident curiosity. "Your species has gained a certain reputation," Zrelka explained as they entered a large gallery area. "Word has spread quickly through the galactic community." "What kind of reputation?" John asked, slightly concerned. "As the crucible that forged your species," Zrelka replied, leading John toward a wall of display screens where groups of aliens from different species were gathered. John was surprised to see that the screens were showing footage from Earth, specifically footage of predators in action. One large display showed the massive anaconda they had encountered during the expedition 6 months ago. "This is from our trip," John said, recognizing the distinctive markings on the snake. "Yes," Zrelka confirmed. "The recordings made by our science team have become quite popular. Many spacefaring races are fascinated by Earth's predators." John watched as aliens from at least a dozen different worlds stood transfixed by the displays. Some appeared physically uncomfortable, backing away when the anaconda on screen suddenly struck at prey. Others leaned closer, their alien features impossible to read but their body language suggesting intense fascination. "I don't understand," John admitted. "Why are they so interested in our predators?" "Because many spacefaring races evolved on worlds with minimal predatory threats," Zrelka explained. "The Vorlon," she indicated a group of tall, slender beings with blue skin, evolved on a world with no land predators larger than what you would call a fox. "The Myth," she nodded toward floating jellyfish-like creatures, developed intelligence in peaceful ocean currents without major threats. "And the Keldari?" Susan asked, joining them. "Our ancestors faced competition, yes, but not true predation. Not for millions of years before we developed intelligence and technology." Zrelka's compound eyes studied the humans. "You are different. You developed intelligence while surrounded by creatures perfectly evolved to hunt you." As they continued through the gallery, John realized all the displays featured Earth's most dangerous predators. Great white sharks, tigers, lions, crocodiles, and most prominently, various snake species including many anaconda clips. They stopped before a large screen showing footage from their expedition, the moment when the massive anaconda had suddenly surged from the water to capture a capybara on the shore. The alien observers watching the display physically backed away from the screen. "You see," Zrelka continued, "many wondered why Earth joined the galactic community so late despite your obvious intelligence. Now they understand. You weren't just developing technology. You were surviving an ecosystem that would have eliminated most sentient species before they ever struck their first fire." John watched a group of alien diplomats flinch at footage of an anaconda swallowing its prey whole. He felt a strange mixture of pride and humility. "Perhaps that's why we've adapted so well to the challenges of space," he suggested. "After evolving, on a planet where even the mud beneath your feet might contain something that can eat you whole, well, the void of space seems almost welcoming by comparison." The aliens clicked in their version of nervous laughter, but John could see in their compound eyes a new respect. Later that day, John and Susan were invited to a meeting with the Keldari High Council, the governing body of their species. The chamber was vast, with curved walls that seemed to be made of some pearlescent material that glowed softly. Dozens of high-ranking Keldari sat in a semicircle, their attention focused on the human visitors. "We have studied your species extensively since first contact," the head counselor said, "and we have reached some interesting conclusions." "What kind of conclusions?" John asked. "Humans possess qualities that are rare among spacefaring races," the counselor explained. "Adaptability, creativity, rapid problem-solving under stress, and most notably, a unique form of risk assessment." "Risk assessment?" Susan asked. "Yes. Most intelligent species develop extreme caution or extreme aggression. Yours has a balance we have not observed elsewhere. The counselor's antennae moved in what John had learned was a gesture of respect. We believe this comes from your evolutionary path, constantly balanced between being predator and prey. Another counselor spoke. Your anacondas and other predators shaped human psychology in ways that may serve you well as you join the galactic community. How so? John asked. The galaxy is not always a safe place, the head counselor replied. There are threats, challenges, and unknowns. Species that evolved in safety often struggle when facing the unexpected. Humans, however, we're used to watching the water for ripples, Susan finished with a small smile. Precisely, the counselor agreed. This is why we have proposed a special role for humanity within the Alliance of Worlds. John felt a surge of surprise. Earth had only just made first contact, and already they were being offered a role in galactic politics? What kind of role? He asked. Explorers, mediators, those who go first into unknown territories. The counselor's compound eyes fixed on John. You see threats others miss. You adapt to dangers others cannot comprehend. These are valuable traits. As the meeting concluded and the humans were escorted back to their quarters, John stood by a viewing portal, looking down at Earth shining blue and white against the blackness of space. It's strange, he said to Susan. All our lives we saw predators like anacondas as something to fear. Now they might be the reason aliens respect us. Susan smiled. Our fears shaped us, made us stronger, more adaptable. Who would have thought that explaining anacondas to aliens would end up being humanity's introduction to the galaxy? John watched as a Keldari ship glided past the viewing portal, heading toward Earth. In the 6 months since first contact, the world had changed more than in the previous century. New technologies were being shared, new alliances formed, new possibilities opening up. And it had all started because some aliens got stuck in a swamp and asked a simple question. Why do humans fear murky water? The answer, a giant snake that could crush and swallow a person whole, had given aliens across the galaxy a new perspective on humanity. John smiled at the thought. Humans had reached the stars not despite evolving alongside dangerous predators, but perhaps because of it. The legacy of the anaconda and countless other threats had prepared humanity for the challenges of a vast, unpredictable universe. As ambassadors of a species that knew both how to hunt and how to avoid being hunted, humans had found their place among the stars.